Welcome to Sweet Spot. I'm really looking forward to sharing today's recipe for a coffee cake, a Dimple coffee cake. We're making it 2 different ways. But first I want to share with you a new watch app I found in the App Store. It's called Sparky. You simply start it, and then, oddly, you can make sparks. I don't know what you're supposed to do with that, but it's pretty cool. On to the recipe. This coffee cake, unlike most coffee cakes, are yeast-based, which means that we need to proof the yeast to start. You do that pretty simply. For this, you need a tablespoon of sugar and a 1/4 cup of pretty warm water, not hot, not boiling water, but water that is approximately between the range of 100 and 105 degrees. I use a thermometer to check it out, and we are just there. Simply put the water in with the sugar, tablespoon. Stir to dissolve the sugar a little bit, and sprinkle on the yeast. Don't stir yet, as the yeast will soften by itself. Simply cover it with a piece of plastic wrap and set it aside for a few minutes. Using a stand mixer for this recipe makes things a lot easier. We start with 3 cups of flour. That's about 380 grams of flour. And 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. If your preference is to use weights to do measurements, and you come across a recipe that calls for a teaspoon of this or a tablespoon of that, simply ask Google or Siri to convert that for you. Hey Siri, how many grams does a tablespoon of sugar weigh?
That would be 12.4 grams.
And there you go. 3 tablespoons. I still use a tablespoon to measure sugar. A teaspoon of salt. And we give this a quick mix. Then we want to add a 1/2 pound of butter that's been cut up into cubes. I like to cut it when it's very chilled, but you want to bring this not to room temperature, not all the way chilled, just slightly in between. This will take about 3 or 4 minutes. In the meantime, uncover your yeast. Give that a quick whisk with a fork. Cover that back up just for a minute. In a separate bowl, we want to mix our 1/2 cup of milk, 3 egg yolks, our vanilla. Again, just use a fork to whisk this quickly. You'll know when the flour and butter mixture is ready when you have crumbs. You don't want to mix this until a ball is formed. It's kind of like pie dough. And the yeast should be fully proofed and very bubbly on top. Then combine the yeast into the egg mixture and give that a quick stir. And pour this into the flour and mix just for a minute. Stop the mixer and give a quick stir, scraping down the sides of the bowl. Then another few seconds. This dough needs to sit in the fridge overnight. We want to slightly butter a bowl so it won't stick. And it doesn't just have to sit overnight. If you're not ready to make the coffee cake until 2 or 3 days later, that's fine too. The dough will be very soft and sticky. It's supposed to be. With your fingers dipped in flour, press the dough down so it's reasonably smooth. And again, with a smear of softened butter, just rub some onto the top of the dough. The butter on top prevents a crust from forming. Cover with some plastic wrap and into the fridge. See you tomorrow. Lucky for us, I made a batch of this yesterday, so you don't have to sit here watching me for 2 hours doing nothing but snap, snap, snap. This has been sitting out of the fridge for about 2 hours. It's a little puffed, but not too puffed. On a clean work surface with just a little bit of flour. Scrape this out of the bowl. Cut it in half. And put half back in the bowl. Cover it up. You can save this in the fridge or make a second batch, which is what I'm going to do a little bit later. Again, a little bit of flour. You want to kind of work this gently and incorporate the raisins. Now these are plumped raisins. To plump a raisin, which will make it much more tender and soft when you bite into it eventually, is take your raisins. We're using about 1/3 cup. That's, hey Siri, how many grams in 1/3 cup of raisins?
I would guess 50 grams. And while you are thinking about it, the easiest method to plump raisins is to boil 1 to 2 cups of water. Stir in the raisins and turn off the heat. After 5 minutes, pour the contents through a strainer, then pat the raisins dry with a paper towel.
And simply incorporate the raisins by working them in the dough. And after the raisins are folded in, let the dough rest for a few minutes. While you're waiting, prep your pan. We need an 8x8 or 9x9 inch baking pan. Smear a little butter around the outsides of the pan. Cut out a piece of parchment that's going to overlap on 2 of the sides and place it in. The dough's been resting quite nicely for a little bit. We can either stretch it to fill the pan or simply use a rolling pin to roll it out to a square approximately and place it in the pan. Now we need to let this baby sit and grow a little bit, get a little fat and puffy for about an hour. Cover it with a tea towel and put it in a nice warm place. Our last step. Our dough has risen nicely. It's very fat and puffy looking. We want to make some cinnamon sugar. This is really easy. 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Hey Siri dear.
Yes, sweetheart.
How many grams are in 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar?
24.75 grams.
And a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Grams for that, Siri.
About 0.75 grams.
Simply give this a stir. Voila, cinnamon sugar. And I've cut up a 1/2 stick of butter. Grams, please.
2 ounces of butter is 57 grams.
Into 32 pieces because we're going to make 32 holes and put a piece of butter in each one. Just randomly, or not so randomly, 32 holes. These little dimples, oh, this feels good putting the finger in here. These 32 dimples, we each get a little bit of butter and a little bit of brown sugar. With about 1/3 cup of brown sugar,
71 grams is the mass of 1/3 cup of brown sugar.
we want to carefully spoon in a little sugar into each of the holes, these little dimples we made. Do this neatly and you'll have a really nice effect when it comes out of the oven. Then place a little pat of butter that you just cut out into each little dimple hole on top of the brown sugar. And then finally, with the cinnamon sugar we just mixed up, we sprinkle that all over the top. And then into the oven, 375 degrees for about 25 to 30 minutes. These look and smell delicious. The cinnamon is just wafting from here. They're cooked, they've been cooling for 20 minutes. I cut them, flipped them out and cut them. Let me take one. Excuse my fingers. The dimples stayed intact. deep little pockets full of brown sugar. Crisp bite, I could tell from the top, it cracked. Very soft dough. The cinnamon top, this actually reminds me of cinnamon toast. Do you ever cinnamon toast, butter and sugar on toasted, open faced on toasted bread? Do kids still eat that? Does anyone eat that still? Let me sneak in a bite of a Dimple, since we spent so much time on them. The cake part is rich. It's full of butter. We know it's full of butter. Very tender. You bite into an occasional raisin, very plump raisins, as you know. What a delightful little coffee cake. This Dimple coffee cake is a winner. And you know we had the extra half of the dough that we prepared. So while you weren't looking, I went ahead and I let the dough rise. I dimpled it. Then rather than the brown sugar and butter in each dimple, I put a dab of strawberry preserves to fill the dimple and topped that with a mini pat of butter, just like we did with the brown sugar. It was baked for the same 25 minutes. It was cooled and cut, and look what we have here. Gorgeous. Same crisp top, I can tell. Wow, the strawberry preserves in the butter, that's magical. The cinnamon from the top, just as before. What a nice combination. And which of the two of these do I like better? The brown sugar and butter or the strawberry preserves and butter? They're both really good and not that difficult to make. Little time consuming because of the yeast, but really not hard. If you're not a subscriber to Sweet Spot Kitchen, now's the time. Click on the subscribe link down there and hit the bell to be notified. I'd love to read any comments you have. You'll find the full recipe in the YouTube notes below. And until next time, this is it for Sweet Spot.
You are my sweet spot.